Hi, my name is Shani, and welcome to the Experienced Designers Podcast, where we explore the human experience, what it is, and how we might create better ones for ourselves and for others. In this episode, we talk to Imran Rehman, a leadership coach and founder of Vienna-based Kokoro, who provide a web-based tool that help create high-performing teams. We talk about our need to challenge our current ways of working, about community, belonging, and how we can create environments that give space for diversity. And we explore what it means to use a community-based paradigm in how we set up organizations and why this is important to a good human experience. We look at how we kind of force ourselves to change our focus from performance to contribution, and from chasing attention to doing with intention. And what happens then? Let's dig in. Welcome, Imran. I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you.
In preparation for us recording this episode, I had a look through your CV, obviously, and looked at the things that you've done. And you've taken quite the journey through academia, into the corporate space, into now owning your own business where you focus on how you set up context for teams to perform well.
Correct.
But I would love to hear in your words, like what brought you here?
It's a really good question always, isn't it? It's one of those that over the years you change every time because you realize a new aspect of your life. What got me here very often, I think, is the communities I grew up in. And some of the communities were Asian. Some of the communities were being where I went to school in London, and then also in the north of England, and also back in northern Pakistan, as well as the communities that come from our culture, whether they were Gujarati, whether they were Punjabi, whether they were Indian or Afghani, or even some from the African subcontinent and from other parts of the world. They all really formed you. And one part of it was that I think what got me here today and to keep trying new things was the fact that our culture was very strict in telling us who we had to be. We had no freedom in choice of who we were going to become because it was decided while you were in your mother's belly. And so as I popped out, I had a lawyer's face, and it was expected I become a lawyer. And I think that is one reason I think I am where I am today, because I went and explored. So like in my name, I think people always say this was one of the sort of nicknames in my family. Im ran away. So I think somehow that has a positive side and also a side where I also struggled with, and I had to reflect upon it and also realize that running away doesn't always help.
It doesn't. Well, what were you running to?
I think it was always not being, very often it had to do with not being accepted somewhere, not feeling you belong, and thinking, I think I need to go somewhere else where I'm appreciated. So like in the UK, one of the things was we grew up on a number of languages. We had languages around us. We were multilingual. We had multiple aspects. We navigated multiple cultures, and there was respect. There was this eye level of getting on with each other. And I think that is something then nobody saw that in you. No teacher saw it. No university saw it. Nobody saw it. No English person saw it.
The diversity.
Yeah, they saw, and if anything, if they did see it, it was pointed out to you as bad or not good enough, or hey, you're the ones with 5 kids, 6 kids, living off the state. That's why you're here. I think that's what took me away, because I ended up going to places like Spain, where I found there was a level of humanity, where there was an interest in me, the languages, my culture, our food, I'm back in the UK and in London. I never felt that. I didn't feel it until I went back later. I always
Yeah.
felt I had to prove myself, and very often you would turn up to places and they didn't expect you to be brown, and they also said that to you directly to your face. So I think that sort of stuff is what kept me moving and trying and experimenting, and that you then don't, you don't take no for an answer, or you say, okay, look, you think cultural fit works.
Mm.
I know it doesn't. I'm not interested in cultural fit. I never have been, because I've never fitted in. And I've met a
Mm.
lot of people along the way who have never fitted in. And
Mm.
we accept them as the maverick. We accept them as something, oh, she or he's a bit strange, or, oh, they're a bit different, or no, why not see them as a cultural ad? What?
The cultural ad.
That's
Yes.
that is the word that I think if we were to change, or if we were to change the way we look at the world, and we said, well, how would I structure the world? How would my workflows, how would my processes, how would I make decisions if it was all based on building a world in which there is cultural add and not
Mm.
continuously looking for cultural fit?
Yeah. So with all that in mind, I'm just thinking you kind of broke free from a lot of ideas of what anything or anybody needs to be into something different and into exploration. And yeah, I'm a little bit curious, kind of what did you find along the way? So what, based on your exploration, what is a human experience? What is a good human experience?
Well, for me, it's actually a really good question. For me, I go back to when I read the word human, and then I read the word experience, and then I say, okay, this is where maybe education does impact you. You think, okay, let me break that down. Let me get to the root of what human is. And human for me is something living, and you could put lots of spins on that, but ultimately, I think it has to do with the two effects that a human has experiences the world either in a pleasant way or an unpleasant way. And if it's not that, no, it's that as well as something that can be calm or agitated, or calm and lively. So I'm going back to the two effects of what you learn around what is the basis on which the first amoeba or living cell, could sense the world around them. And it was based on the two effects. So, is it unpleasant? Is it pleasant? Is it a calm sort of thing I'm experiencing? Or is it something which is eventful, or what would be the other side of it? Yeah, eventful, So those are the sort of things I look at when I look at the word human. And then I think the word experience for me all boils down to one thing: it's personal. Nobody can force an experience on you. No one. If I put a gun to your head, Shani, then it's called in legal terms duress. So you're not experiencing something that you want to experience, and you are under duress, and therefore act differently to what you want to act. So
Mm.
it is that space of autonomy, flexibility. And then if you go into things like individual psychology, and if you get into the details, you start realizing that at the core of the human experience is self determination. It's the whole idea of autonomy, flexibility. And so if you put those two things together, then you can start thinking, well, what creates what creates a pleasant sort of experience that is eventful for you human is most probably what everybody's in search of as the human experience. And whether you want to call that happiness, being content, satisfied, it makes no difference. But that's for me the core of the human experience. And I think this makes it even a bit more complicated. You determine that, but I think there are attractors outside you get attracted to.
Mm.
So, and those attractors you're looking for and in search of. forever.
S- So, what are things that have brought you a happy experience?
Well, the thing is, one thing for me has been connecting with people. I mean, I realize every time I hold a keynote or every time I'm in a group and doing a workshop, if there's any stress in my body, it's gone,
Mm,
and I'm in my element, and I have fun. I joke around, and on the stage, it becomes almost like, how can I touch people with words? How can I touch people with emotions? How can I touch people with whatever sort of rhetorical sort of skill I have? I want to touch people with them so they can feel where I'm coming from. And one key thing that's always happened, and I didn't realize, was this whole idea of how do I keep it at eye level? That it's,
mm,
I don't build vertical relationships, so top down.
mm,
I build horizontal relationships. And horizontal relationships for me are always about encouraging each other in the conversation. And I find that is something I've always looked for in leaders and how I've led myself, that I want to lead through the words of encouragement and not through the words of praise. And
mm.
that's a hard one for many to understand because,
Yeah.
what do you mean? You don't want to
What?
praise? Don't you praise people? I compliment people. I say wonderful things about people, but I don't praise them because the other side of praise is punishment.
Mm,
So
okay.
praise doesn't come without punishment. And then if you look at your wording, how would you say somebody's done some great work, for example, or somebody's done something which you didn't expect, and you think, wow, that's fantastic. Um, if you praise them and say, that was a good job, Shani, you already
Mm,
indirectly what you're saying to somebody is you're almost as good as me, but you're getting there.
yeah. And that's this vertical relationship
Relationship
that
that
you
you're
talked
building,
about.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then if you want to build a horizontal relationship, start with your children and see, hey, how do I say something to my child in a way that is encouraging?
Mm,
And you start realizing how difficult it is because you'll end up praising, because we
yeah.
all have been conditioned. And whether you've been to mosque, church, synagogue, gurdwara, or a temple, or whatever, or if you've been to whatever school system you've been to, and also if you've been agnostic, atheist, you'll find we are conditioned. We're conditioned to praise. And it's a
Mm,
really hard conditioning to reflect upon and change in your behavior. And I find that's where communities come in. Communities have this very magical aspect of not allowing, if you're in a great community, you grow, your human experience grow. You grow
mm,
as a human, and sometimes you don't even know that you're growing. And for me, that is the community structure. If you take a company structure that can be hierarchical, and I know there are many
mm,
other types of structures, um, but if you compare a hierarchical one to a community structure, people always say, "What's the difference for you, Imran?" And I go, "Well, it's simple. A hierarchical structure will always bring efficiency and stability, and then a community structure will always bring um, it will be about human experience and human growth."
mm. And bringing out what is good about each person, right?
Exactly, that's
You
it.
can't do if somebody has to be the best all the time,
No, you
a
can't do that.
single
No,
person.
you can't do that. And I think that is one of the hardest sort of things for people to comprehend when you start saying, but then how do I build a community structure into a business? And I think that's going to be
Mm,
the new competitive advantage. If you look at the future, if you look at marketing, we know the era of winning people's attention is over.
mm,
The golden era of marketing has come to an end, and we don't want to be punched in the face in multiple ways. What we want is marketing that looks at our intention and targets our intention. So I
mm,
think we're moving from an attention economy into an intention economy. If that is happening, then it makes sense that the structures we had in the past, the agency structures, all those, need to integrate a community structure where they create their communities and have more targeted ways of speaking to people, to customers. And so you'll
mm,
find that means that even, it doesn't mean as well, but it means agencies will have to contribute to the society in which they're targeting their people. And that is
I
the
love
basis of
that.
all community. You don't come to community and take. If you're a person who comes in and takes, then you cannot be a community person. You need to
So,
come in
in
and
yeah,
and contribute. And that is the core of being a satisfied person. A
yeah.
content
So
person
going,
is a person who contributes. If you know your contribution, then you will feel you belong. You will feel you have
mm,
your place. You will feel important. You will then be able to see and be inspired by others and become who you need to become. And then you'll also
mm,
connect in networks, and to the people you need to grow and learn and continue um, building your acceptance and tolerance of new things around you.
yeah.
It's a lot in
So
there.
you're, yeah, there's a lot in there, like talking about going from performance to contribution, which in itself is a huge step, right? From matrix to network,
Yep.
where, the weight is is more equally distributed somehow. I really like this thought of community and contribution and belonging. Tell me more about that sense, because you've
So
touched on this.
belonging. I think so. First of all, I think we underestimate it and have done so,
Mm,
even though we know it is the most important thing. If you do not have a sense of belonging or do not feel you belong, then nothing else can be done. Your brain is in spasm. Your brain shuts down. It is painful not to belong. So, take a simple example like some of the observations we've done with teams and team members. And in one situation, it was a canteen um, where I was observing a team member coming with his food, and suddenly was in a situation where he could see his old team members and his new team members. And he was saying, okay, who do I go to? If I go to my old team, then the new team will think, oh, look, he still hasn't really come over to our side. If he goes to his new team
mm,
members, what will his old team members think? Oh, look, he's forgotten us already. And the
mm,
reason I know this is because we spoke to him afterwards, and he said, this is what went through my head. And I didn't know what was the right thing to do. And we said, yes, and that is belonging. Because if you go to your new team, the others don't feel important anymore. What do you mean? Don't you respect your past? You can see that
mm,
belonging. I mean, and ultimately, when you start realizing stuff like that, you start realizing, okay, so what is personality then? Why do we focus so much on personality? And personality ultimately
mm,
is nothing more than an element of us that is looking to belong. It's where does my personality belong? That's what you're doing all the time, whether it's in partnership, whether it's in the family. If you look at a lot of the stuff that happens in family dynamics or in team dynamics, organizational dynamics, it's all around belonging. And when you then break it down, you will see very, very quickly that belonging, it all comes back to belonging. And belonging is ultimately, finding your place in yourself, um, in
mm.
your family, in your friends, in school, in university, at work, in your team, with your customers, in society, in your city, in your town. That's what you do continuously. It doesn't.
Yeah. I know I listened to a talk with Brene Brown, and I will probably slightly butcher this quote, but the essence of it was something along the line of the difference between belonging and fitting in, where fitting in, you have to actually adapt yourself and twist yourself into a different shape to be able to be part of the group. Whereas in belonging, you have a place because you are yourself, because you are good at the things that you do. And that is what grants you a sense of belonging without having
Spot
to be
on.
somebody else.
Yeah, and let's translate that into modern organizations now.
Mm,
And that's what I do. Then I go, okay, so then why are we building this place where we say to become a leader, you've got to fit into this hole, have these
yeah.
competencies, have these behaviors. And then we go away and say, well, how did that person get into that place? God,
Yeah.
why do we pick leaders that are like that? And you think, well, what if we realized that it's the uniqueness of each and every individual, and we have to make space for each and every uniqueness in the organization? And if we started doing that and start looking at, coming back to your first two words, what is the human experience we want to scale? What is the moments that we
Mm,
want to see more of? And what moments do we want to eliminate and see less of?
mm,
And what person has the talent and uniqueness to be able to create those moments? Then I think we would start seeing a leadership approach in organization that moves away from, as you so wonderfully described by Brene Brown, that you fit into a box and you only fit into the, once you're in that box, then we can promote you.
yeah.
That's what we
It's a
do.
very hard box to fit into.
Yeah, do you
Yeah.
understand? Yeah, and
Especially the leader box. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so what you start doing is you then start saying, well, it's more likely that these type of people fit into this box, and you end up creating homogenous leaders. Or you
Mm,
know that in the lower levels of organization, the organization is very diverse, very different, but the organization through this box is not able to see all the talent. At no
mm,
fault to anybody, nobody's to blame here, but you're
no.
creating a very, very sort of small lens, and you don't see all the talent. Um, where if you look very, very carefully, you will realize that most women will have to check the environment in which they are. So if you're interviewing them, and even though they are already very successful in the organization, going up the organization, you'll find it's not that not, some might not be interested. There might be many reasons why they don't want to go up there. But say if there is somebody who wants to be promoted, then you will find that they will first say, well, is this role right for me? So the first sort of questions you do, you'll check the environment to see if it's safe for you and if you can belong.
Mm,
And that comes
mm,
across as then, oh, is this person not confident enough? I know that,
yeah.
and then very often you'll find, and in my experience, maybe other people have experienced other things, that we choose confidence over competence because
Mm,
we confuse confidence directly with somebody being, hey, look, when we ask them that question in an interview, then they answer straight away. She was too sort of not sure in the way she replied. You're thinking, no,
mm,
doubt is a sign of somebody learning. Doubt is somebody testing out the waters. Doubt
mm.
is the core of the way we progress. Doubt
Yeah.
is not and has never been a sign of not being able to lead.
I love that. And in recent years, I've gone from this more like dogmatic thing that you do when you're young, where you're like looking for all the answers, and now moving to looking for the next question.
Yeah,
What is the next thing I don't know
yeah.
right now
Yeah, do you see what I
that I
mean?
can explore? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
I don't know. I mean, to summarize all those words I've just said, for anybody listening and doesn't get it, what I'm saying ultimately is we don't need know-it-all leaders. We need it. We need to have learn-it-all leaders.
yeah,
That's
I
it.
love that.
That's it. That's the
And
difference.
what I'm hearing you say also, underneath all these ideas of the community and belonging, I think it loops back also to the diversity you were mentioning as you were talking about your background, is we have to learn to embrace more diversity and more complexity, um, in order to move forward. There is no world where we all are going to be streamlined and in agreement with one another, because that's the place where we killed all our uniqueness and all of our capabilities and all of our personality, really.
Then it gets really
Um,
interesting when you say that, Shani, because then you've got people embracing it, and then how do you model it? Because
yeah,
if people have got to embrace it and everybody's responsible for it, somebody's got to model it first.
yeah, and you have to create the context for it. And that
Yeah,
was actually going to be my next question. So if we talk about all these things, and they're not small and simple, they're quite big and complex. How do you build it?
yeah.
How do you set that
So
scene?
like,
And
I
what
mean,
does it look like?
if I was working with an organization, then there'll be something which would be a bit more sort of structured in the way you build a community. There's got to be governance in it. You got to look at how people join the community, lead the community. You got to create the community experience. But I want to get a bit more granular with that, because I
Yeah,
think what
do.
matters today is how you interact and the quality of interaction you have with people, um, and the way your team interacts with another team. So
Mm.
there, I think there are like three things that really matter, and I don't find them easy. None of them. Okay, so I think I learn every day, and I do it. I play with it, and I have fun with it. And I think everybody who hears this now should go out and try it. Okay, so here we go. Here is what the first one is the ability to facilitate a conversation.
Yeah.
So like
Mm.
when you are sitting somewhere, say, okay, how do I open up a conversation? And I do it in such a way that the person does not feel, God, why are you talking to me?
Mm.
And that's what happens. And there will be moments where you will realize this person doesn't want to talk and it's okay, then you stop. But very often people are very happy to be spoken to. And if a conversation comes out of it, then they're at the end, very often you will hear something like, oh, that was a nice surprise. Thank you. People will thank you for
Mm.
having that conversation, however short. So that is maybe the first step. Can you do that? And if you're not that sort of person that can do that, then the other two might be more your thing. The second thing for me is you have the ability to read the room. So you can go into a space and then sense what's happening. And that could also
Mm.
be like the ability to go into an area where there are only dogs, and realize the difference between a dog that's struggling, a dog that's happy, a dog that's crazy, a dog that's coming in and changing the dynamic. And it might be a dog fight because of the dynamic that's coming to the room, into the space where the
Mm.
dogs are playing. And I know that might sound a bit funny. I spend a lot of time with dogs because I have one. I have a dog, but I'm playing that into now the real world, into the world of humans and human experience, where you start sensing what people are, what's going on in the room. Online today, how do you know if somebody's not doing well? How do you read people online? How do you read a room when you're there and think, hang on, are you okay? Are you well? How do you read happiness? How all this reading is really, really
Mm.
important, and it's even more so today, because if you're able to facilitate the conversation at the same time able to read, then the likelihood is that you will be able to hold that conversation. Now, the
Yeah.
last one is then being able to hold space when the conversation gets
Mm.
uncomfortable. Yeah. If
Yeah.
somebody, then you talk to somebody and they, in their tone of voice, throw something back at you and said, "How dare you speak to me?" And you think, well, okay, how do I keep the conversation going? How do I hold that space? The person is irritated. Is the person irritated because I have spoken to them? Are they irritated because they're like irritated with life? Are they irritated with their teammate? Are they irritated with whatever's happened in the last meeting? And then you are able to hold that space. And holding that space might mean that your back sweats, that you struggle as well a little bit, but learn to do this. And if you're
Mm.
able to then carry it with empathy, if you're able to carry it with a bit of assertiveness, because you've got to have some assertiveness there,
Yeah.
and ask what you always do, Shani, is ask questions. So add a question to it,
Mm.
um, and hold space and use silence. And so ask a
Yeah.
question and go quiet. And then you'll
Mm.
suddenly find that these three things together can create dialogue. And even if
Mm.
you might be disagreeing, you will continue speaking. Now, that's something I don't think we do very well, any of us. And I think we should practice that more and more. And if I could turn a few leadership programs, I would turn all of them into just practicing those three things.
Yeah. I love what you're ending up in is this speak through your disagreement
Yeah.
and not shutting down at that point, but actually using that as an engine to
Mm.
understand each other.
And see,
How, yeah.
yeah, see, and you can see what happens then. And then also on top of that, there comes this other thing of like, well, what if somebody's being horrible and mean to me? Well, look at how they are being mean to you. If they are being mean in a way where we're hitting one of the ableisms, the isms, and it's hurting you and it's an aggression, then that is a line. You have your boundary, then set a boundary. Don't be afraid to
Mm.
set a boundary. I'll give a simple
Mm.
example here. After a certain point in time, being asked, 10,000 times in German, where do you come from originally? And very often the person asking you hasn't even got to know you. They want to know ultimately why are you European and have brown skin, and then when you don't answer, they pull it in a different direction by saying, well, it's, I'm just interested in different cultures. And you're saying, yeah, but you're in the last year, you're the 10,000th person who's asked me, and I find it annoying. And I'd like you to pull back. And, I don't, you've been speaking to me for 30 seconds. You do not know me. And then how do you, that's one conversation I hold now. At the beginning, I'd get irate and angry and upset and push them away. All my defensive behaviors would come out. Then over the years, I started realizing, okay, you want to know my past? You want to know where I come from originally? Okay, sit down. You got 30 minutes. And I take 30 minutes of their time.
Yeah.
And I give them I go through my grandparents, I go through everything, and I can talk about my past. And then people like saying, but I got to go. No, just sit down. You asked for where I come from originally. You're going to get it now. And you're going to sit here and have the respect to see it through. And all what I do is I then start saying, I don't understand the question, and I hold the conversation. And people go all over the place. So, oh, yeah, now I get the question you're trying to ask me. Why are you brown and European? Because you expect all Europeans to be white. That's why the word original or originally from comes from. And it might be, and I know it's coming from a good part of your heart, but are you open to sit here with me and so I can explain to you why that hurts so many people?
Yeah.
And then they start
Invertedly. Yeah, I'm very curious then in the inverted points of view, because now you've had that experience of getting that question a lot of times and practiced how in different ways you can hold that space. But unavoidably, I think we as people, wherever that intention comes from, it might still be something we're curious about. How do you ask that question in a way that
well, I
is
think,
nicer to receive?
yeah, very often, one of the nicest ways is if you just met somebody, talk about yourself and where you come from, and people
Give of
reciprocate.
yourself first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
contribute to the conversation. Don't come
Same as
in.
in community.
Yes,
Yeah.
don't come
Come
in and
in and
take.
give.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll find that whenever you walk into some of the most beautiful communities around the world, and there are many, you'll find the elders, or you'll find people who have been in communities most of their lives will always speak about themselves first, inviting you to speak. They will, if anything, they might start with the question, so what brings you here?
Yeah.
But they will talk about themselves. And it's interesting because then it makes you feel safe because you're new. You might be like, am I welcomed here? And then the conversation starts. Another way of doing it is by, if you want to ask directly and very quickly, people have said to me, Imran, no, I know you might not like this question, but look, I'm doing it because prepare me. And go, and if you
Yeah.
got, if the reason from you is truly that you are a person who studies populations from an ethnographic point of view, and you find, the shape of my face resembles Afghans and, different parts of the world or whatever, then my skull shape and this and that, then hey, gladly do so. I've got no, it's, finding out your motive of why you're asking
Yeah.
the question would be great.
Build up with the intention.
Yeah.
And I like what you're saying around the openness. There's actually research around this too, where it is kind of stating if you want to build trust, which is definitely necessary within a community, you have to start with yourself, and you have to start by being open with yourself. And as you then you spiral deeper into trust and into connection and into relationship with one another. Because when you open the play field to give of yourself, it invites the next one to do the same, and so on and so forth. So,
Can you see that? And then you
yeah,
start
very nice. Yeah.
realizing, that ultimately, when people ask for recognition, what they're asking is, get to know me better.
Yeah.
When
See
people are,
me.
yeah. Do you understand? When people are asking for, like, how, I mean, I was, when I first began to facilitate and run workshops, I would always say at the beginning, look, and please be open for the next 2 days. And at one point, I realized it's almost like you would never tell somebody to be resilient by themselves, would you?
No.
You don't go into rooms. Okay, now be more resilient. Okay, I'm done. Go. We're doing the same thing with being open, where it'll be interesting then to come in and say, for example, how can I make the environment so we can accept each other's views? Because
Yeah.
it's about learning to accept, and acceptance is at the core of being open and an understanding for somebody else's different perspective. So, and I realized as I went on, I stopped saying the term. And in this workshop for the next 2 days, please be open, because I don't say that anymore. I don't find that is the core of creating a psychological safe environment for a group. Don't tell people to be open.
Be
Uh,
open. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't say that anymore. I don't even have it on a card. I don't have it anywhere. If anything, I start off by saying, what helps you to accept others better?
I love that, leading with a question and
Yeah, so
finding
I mean,
out
it
how
will.
others relate to it.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And understanding the ability of your own way of accepting other perspectives, and that
Mm.
in itself, sharing that might indirectly improve the openness in the group.
How can you stimulate that in a company? Because those are usually big, complex structures. What are things that organizations can do to
Well,
help?
well, I'm a big fan of data, and I think one of the first things you've got to do is start providing the right data to the right people. So far, the data remains with a select or elite few, to use two words. That it's up to you how you choose it. But that's one of the biggest issues. And also realizing that the individual performance is not the most important.
Yeah, I
The
love
most
that.
important unit of performance is the team. So if you then take those two things and start saying, well, what can I do to strengthen that? What structures do we change? And then, because through the structures you have power. Belonging
Mm,
always works through structures of opportunity and access.
mm,
So any structure will provide an opportunity or provide access to something. Look at them and start changing them, and you'll create it. It's not,
mm,
it's people always say, is it hard? No. So who should model it? Well, the leadership need to model belonging so other people can embrace it. If the
mm,
goals are, if leaders have goals they want to set for the organization, then don't cascade the goals, cascade meaning, and then build the structures
mm.
in such a way that the teams are able to deliver. And then teams themselves will work it out. So and coming back to what we said at the beginning, autonomy, flexibility. Um, you know, these are all the things that keep coming up again and again and again, and you do them through structure. So the hundreds of teams we looked at over the years, one thing we just found is that the teams that were able to change the structures the quickest created the best sense of belonging, the best psychological safety, and the best performance. And there are people
Mm.
that say, oh, so do they do things differently? No, they don't. High performing teams don't do things differently. They have a mindset where they're able to change structures really, really quickly. So if you were to join my team, we as a team will have to say, okay, where do we have to now make space? What structures do we have to change? How do our roles all shift? Because otherwise, Shani, you will not be able to find your space. It's the group's
Yeah.
responsibility to make that space, not yours. And at the moment,
Wow.
it's the
Yeah.
individual's responsibility to find out how they belong. And that's where the big error is. And I mean a big error. Um,
So making it the organizations and the team's business to find ways of enabling contribution
yeah,
from
that's it. That's
from
your. It's the
individuals.
yeah, and that's when people can embrace, and then you start, and then things start moving and changing very, very quickly. And it doesn't mean you don't have those places in the organization. You'll find organizations that are very large, and you'll find these places in units of about 150, or you go to one country And you find there it's an amazing culture and an amazing environment, and it works. People then say, "Oh, it's like a family," and it's not. It's just like a community.
It's a
You don't want
community.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I've never been a big fan of my business being like a family. Unless you run a hotel as a family business, then you are a family running a hotel business. But I think in the corporate world, I've always preferred, well, look, I rather feel I belong to a community than I belong to a family. And many of us have
Mm.
had dysfunctional family lives. So families don't create, the most amount of love for us. Very often it's been our friends and our partnerships and our relationships once we were able to leave family dysfunctionality. So you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So for community for me is all accepting.
Yeah.
And if
And
you're
it
able to,
gives meaning.
yeah, that's it. And you're allowed to choose your meaning, because the community might have some goals, but the community gives you the freedom to choose what that goals means to you, and
Mm.
allows you to choose your own goal based on that goal.
Mm.
And that's when goals work. Otherwise, goals don't work.
Amazing. Oh, there's so much to pick apart here. And we could go on forever, I think.
That's true.
But um, I'm curious. Before you mentioned skills around facilitation, reading the room, holding space, and I actually really loved your dog example, because I think it's similar with small children. These are interactions that force us to use our intuition a little bit more and tap into our own humanness. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm wondering, just to wrap up this conversation, what's your invitation to our listeners? How can they contribute to a sense of belonging, or a sense of community in their own lives, in their own context? What are small things that you can start exploring and doing that goes towards that end?
Well, one thing I've always done is, like, I think the pandemic's been really hard. It was really hard for me, and I'm slowly getting back into it. Is making sure you meet new people every week. Give yourself, like, one thing I really like. I call it, sometimes I've had 4 cups of coffee this month with new people, and then next month I aim for 5 cups of coffee with new people. So, like, you ask friends, is somebody I should meet? Who's, who I could learn from. And then you start realizing how your network builds and how things grow. So that's definitely one way. That's maybe, I don't know. I think that helps you to build your network, and also shows you how then suddenly other people in your own group of people will start saying, "God, you know so many people," and you always seem to know different types of people, um, and and you always think, like, well, it's happened because. Sorry about that. I
The
thought I had
joys of
turned it off.
technology.
I thought
Yeah,
I had
that
turned it off.
happens.
I thought I turned it off, and
One of your many connections, obviously, trying to
exactly.
reach
And
you.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
turn it off now, and it won't turn off. I don't know what's wrong with it. I think sometimes I get my funny feeling my phone turns itself back on always. Like, I put it onto
Well,
silent.
that's a beautiful reminder of the community that you've created. So we'll take it.
Exactly. Somebody wants something from me again, or I can help them. Yeah, that's one thing. I think another thing is also, there are some, like, I mean, I always find it's really, really important to find out, like, once you find out your tensions, once you found out things that you find difficult, to lean into them. That's another thing I
Mm,
found around. So you really understand your own boundaries, where you want to belong and where you don't want to belong. And you can learn how to set your boundaries. Um, that's something which I found, like, even though when you see your heart race, when you feel your body's burning, and you lean into it and you sit there and you accept it. And you don't accept it in the sense of saying, I want you to hurt me, but you accept in the sense of, okay, I'm going to be curious about this. I know it's a mindfulness technique, but I find in conversation sometimes that really helps. Because if you've got
mm,
teenage kids, or you're having a difficult conversations with a brother or a sister or a family member, then it helps to move the conversation forward. And very often you can work through maybe an old, grievance, or an old sort of, you said this 10 years ago sort of moment, and it helps you grow together. And I think
mm,
there is something that's very, very interesting at the moment is then how, like one thing I've realized as a coach and working with people, like when one leader leaves or when one family member leaves, moves on, that then they pass it on to the next person, or the person that comes in who's new becomes like the person who left years ago.
So
So
we like inherit the roles of the holes that are
yeah,
left.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You become what's either been there, or you pass on what people have given to you. And I think those are the spaces where it becomes very, very interesting and how you move on from there. And I think one of the ways to do it um, is by looking at finding out and getting to the core and to the essence of where you belong, and then working
Mm,
through those words for yourself. And something very, very simple. I mean, sometimes it's just a very simple mantra for yourself, and you can work through that a lot. Um, so I don't know if I'm not giving any clear answers. If anything, I'm
no, but I
no,
mean, are there clear
no,
answers
there
to
isn't.
anything?
I think there's just like like there are these people who are super resilient and they get on with life, and I find every time I've met them, their ability is to connect. And for me, resilience is a group thing. Um,
Mm,
Connections matter. Therefore, it's your ability to connect and interact. And people with high levels of resilience and who do really, really, really well in times of crisis and are able to stabilize, generally, very often are great at connecting with other people.
mm,
And even with the most difficult people, they do it really, really well without
yeah.
losing their boundaries.
So maintaining your sense of
Yeah,
integrity.
exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what they do. They did phenomenally. And at the moment, what we have sold the world has been that we've sold resilience as grit, and
Mm,
grit runs out of energy, and you fall to pieces. And that's what organizations are still selling in their resilience courses. I know I may be criticized now. Somebody, I hope I haven't, but I think it's got to be said. Currently, there's a confusion out there that it's bite your teeth and see it through.
hustling.
Hustling, yeah, that's the term, isn't it? That's what you've been hearing.
Yeah.
And those hustle cultures just don't work.
No.
They don't.
I I agree with you. I think they can be quite destructive. Or we have to redefine what hustling means.
Yeah, I mean that's what it.
That's also possible.
Yeah,
Same
yeah,
as you were talking about in a family, in a group, like we get to leverage that opportunity to redefine things as well when
yeah,
there is friction or there are empty holes and spaces. But yeah, I think we have some really good things here that, we can do even as individuals. Because I think, especially when we talk about these things that are so big and sometimes so abstract, it's really nice to know the little step that I can take as a person to just move towards that. And you've been saying, expand your network, meet new people, expose yourself to others, lean in on the friction a little sometimes. Don't be afraid of it. It's
mm.
okay. It's a normal thing.
It's almost
And
like
try to,
very
yeah,
often we struggle. I know, maybe somebody can correct me here as well. I find we struggle when, in fact, what's happening is you're shedding a skin and becoming somebody new.
mm. So
It's like
you
you're in the
you love
process
that.
of
Yeah,
you're in the process of like like I've got a snake analogy there, haven't I? So like
yeah.
you're dropping a skin and something new is trying to come out of you, and you're evolving and developing, and that is what's creating the tension.
Yeah.
That's
And
what's
growth is a little bit uncomfortable.
yeah.
It's not necessarily a smooth flow. So
But the
getting
experience.
comfortable with the discomfort can
See,
be a
coming
really,
back to
really
what
good
I
thing.
said at the beginning about it can
Mm.
be it can be a pleasant feeling, but sometimes it can feel uneventful
Yeah.
because it seems so hard. Um,
Mm.
so it's interesting. It's not always magical. It can. There's always this question I ask sometimes when I'm talking to teams and saying, "Okay, so what do you find enjoyable, which has meaning, but bloody hard to do?"
Mm.
And that
It is
gets most
hard.
people because you'll
It's a
generally
big
find,
question.
yeah, yeah, that's what I mean. So you find like, oh, it frustrates you sometimes, but you love doing it.
Mm.
And it gets you, doesn't it? Because you start thinking, well, what is it? What are those things? And very often it's then something very strategic, seeing something that comes to an end. So there are little things that keep happening, that humans want to complete something. People want to see an end. They want to see how they have impacted somebody else or something, and how they are then appreciated and then seen by the group of people seeing you do it, or your team do it, or that there is this thing of progress and and that's what gets that's what that's what enjoyment and meaningful work is for people. I mean, I'm just like trying to I'm trying to summarize all the answers I've seen, the hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah.
answers I've seen, but that's not scientific, but it
No, but I
gives a
think
gist, gives you a gist of something.
it does. But then I think we can in my house we call it taking a question takeaway. Sometimes when something comes up and we're like, I need to think. I
Yeah,
need to think about this.
sleep on
We
it.
say we sleep on it. We take it takeaway, and maybe that's the question takeaway question for our listeners. Is
Yep.
how did you frame it?
So I
What's
framed it.
something that you,
Yeah. What do you really enjoy or love doing? So it's meaningful to you, but find very hard to do. You struggle to do it
yeah.
sometimes, or you find it's exhausting, but you love doing it.
So that's a good question. And you also had another question of what does belonging mean to me? Those are some very good reflections, in addition to some little things that we can do to get closer to our sense of belonging and community.
Yep, definitely.
Amazing. I just really want to thank you, Imran, for sharing your perspectives and your journey and your experience with us.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, hope to continue the conversation in many different ways.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to The Experienced Designers. I hope this episode brought you some new insight into the human experience. Special thanks to Imran for sharing his experience and boundary-pushing perspectives. Don't forget to click subscribe, and as always, get in touch with any questions or suggestions. That's how better experiences are built.